With color identity being one of the most important factors to any deck in Magic, especially in Commander, it's important to understand the color and color pairings. What the color stands for, the pros and cons of running the color, what strategies the color utilizes as well as the cards you may see out of the color are all important factors that need to be considered when running certain colors. To start this series, I would like to start with one of the strongest colors, that being green. Green is the color of vitality, nature, and growth. It seeks to use these values to grow itself into an incredible force that may be difficult to stop. These factors come from those who defend and live in harmony of nature, yet nature itself can be a cruel ground of survival, where only the strongest survive. One of the most notable aspects of green is how fast the color can accelerate its game plan. From cards like Elvish Mystic to Birds of Paradise, the color likes to produce a lot of mana. This mana production doesn't just come from creatures though. Much of it can come from sources like Rampant Growth to search your deck and find more stable mana production through lands. We have other means of acceleration by being able to play multiple lands a turn from our hand through cards like Explore and Azusa Lost but Seeking. Though this is a simple aspect of a color, it is one of the strongest in the game as more mana equals more availability to our own cards. Another aspect of green that should be mentioned is its power in creatures. Green has access to some of the biggest and best creatures in the game. With cards like Apex Devastator and Worldspine Worm, we can easily outclass opponents' creatures and deal huge amounts of combat damage consistently. The only drawback of these types of cards are that they take a huge amount of mana to cast. However, we're in green and just talked about how to get around this pesky aspect. Sometimes our big creatures aren't enough and we need a little more to get over certain boards. Luckily, green is the best color to be in for pump effects like Become Immense and Giant Growth, which grants us a temporary buff to power and toughness for one creature. If we have a wider board, we also have great overrun effects in Craterhoof Behemoth and Mazent Forerunners, which gives us a temporary buff to all of our creatures, which can easily threaten to end games. Though not the best color for it, green also has great options for recursion. Cards like Eternal Witness and Noxious Revival are just some examples, but they allow us to make sure that our strategy, even if removed, can once again be relevant and threatening to our opponents. It should be noted that green offers recursion for any type of card, not just for creatures or other specific card types, making it quite versatile. Finally, if we're having an issue with our opponent's artifacts or enchantments, green is one of the better options to be in. The ease by which comes from cards like Reclamation Sage or Corrosive Grip. Though a very simple effect, its importance cannot be understated as many other colors struggle to get rid of these types of permanents. Being able to destroy key artifacts and enchantments that our opponents have may mean either slowing them down or almost locking them out of the game for their reliance on these types of cards. One of the biggest issues that green can run into is card draw. In green, we must be willing to jump through a few hoops to get reliable card advantage, but we have a means to do so. A few options that are worth a mention are Garruk's Uprising and Greater Good. Though these are very strong cards and effects, green just struggles with having instantaneous card draw that other cards may more easily be able to do. The best card that green has for this kind of instantaneous card draw is Harmonize. However, the cost being at 4 mana really sets it back as other forms of card draw in the color allow for repeatable effects for the same cost in mana. Another issue that green runs into is creature removal. The best form of it that we have is fight effects that can be found on cards like Kagula the Titan Ape or Savage Punch. The problem with this effect is that we require a creature with higher power than our enemy's creature's toughness, while at the same time potentially risking our own creature. Though this isn't bad for the color as we do run massive creatures, other colors are able to remove creatures better without so much hassle and often for less resources. Finally, and a major point of notice is that green doesn't have a lot of access to forms of interaction. Next to cards like Heroic Intervention, the color doesn't like to play to the stack. Mostly the color sticks to only combat tricks for its forms of interactions with cards like Fog. To make terms simpler, if there is a stack that is accumulating from our opponents, green is going to keep clear of the impending chaos and more than likely going to take the hit. With us having weighed the pros and cons of green, we can start developing some strategies. One great one to think about is a land strategy. With us being able to bring out multiple lands a turn, we can take advantage of both landfalls and other great utility land strategies. Cards like Avenger of Zendikar and Scoot Swarm have this ability, Landfall, which triggers whenever we play a land. Pairing this with cards like Cultivate or Summer Bloom can generate massive amounts of value from the landfall triggers. We also don't have to be playing basic land for these triggers, which allows us to be a little more flexible by being able to play cards like Thespian Stage or Field of the Dead. Another strategy to note with our obsessive mana generation is Stompy. Stompy is a strategy that uses our ramp in order to play creatures with massive power quite quickly, with our early turns focusing on mana acceleration with cards like previously mentioned Elvish Mystic, while the mid and late game focuses on playing these creatures as well as attacking for large amounts of damage with cards like Giant Adaphage. Though it is a simple strategy, it is quite effective as opponents will have to be willing to sacrifice their creatures in hopes of mitigating incoming damage. With this, we hope to have a strong board presence and utilizing keywords like trample to get over wide walls. For one of the last strategies that should be mentioned is a go wide strategy. Green is notorious for being able to play many small creatures such as Llanowar Elves and producing tokens through cards like Hornet Queen. Essentially, what we're trying to do is increase our creature count on board so that we can play big overrun effects like Craterhoof Behemoth or Overrun. This type of effect will multiply the amount of damage that we do in a single combat, and in most cases will be enough to finish out a game or take out multiple players. There is a plethora of different mono green commanders that can add variety and build upon the previous mentioned strategies, one of those being Finn the Fangbear. This commander allows the keyword of Death Touch on creatures to turn into a pseudo-toxic 2. This is a fairly decent effect in mono green, as green supports Death Touch quite well. Pair this commander with a couple small creatures like Deadly Recluse or Fang of Shigeki and watch the strategy go, as no one wants to block your Death Touch Toxic 2 creatures. Though not all commanders are like Finn, some want to stay true to what the color is great at, with one of those being Savella, Heart of the Wilds. She entices players to play their biggest creatures to get a little card draw, as well as ramps hard with her ability to tap for mana equal to the highest power creature that you control. She wants to build on herself by accelerating with these big creatures, essentially screaming a mono green dream. With us playing in mono green, we don't have to just rely on what the color can do, but rather look into playing some equipment with Toski, Bearer of Secrets. With Toski, we can use our ramp to play out a bunch of equipments and auras that will give us a nice boost in a strategy known as Voltron. With these boosts, we can crash into our opponents with a large amount of damage. Cards to be on the lookout with this deck may be Bear Umbra, Silent Arbiter, and Blackblade Reforged. Green is quite versatile with its creatures, but the ones we'd likely see the most are Eternal Witness, Avenger of Zendikar, and Temur Sabertooth. Eternal Witness is essentially a body with a great recursion effect and an ETB or Enter the Battlefield effect. Should we figure out a way to recur or blink Eternal Witness, we essentially will never lose cards after they're destroyed. Avenger of Zendikar is another creature with a fantastic ETB effect in which it creates many tokens that can steadily be pumped off landfall triggers. Again, like Eternal Witness, should we find a way to recur or blink Avenger, we can have a very wide board that can be incredibly hard to stop as we steadily pump it. Finally, we'll talk about a way that we can pseudo-blink in the form of Temur Sabertooth. Sabertooth is a fantastic card and can be found in a plethora of other decks than just mono green focus. It is the centerpiece of a lot of combo decks that rely on blink effects, as it is reliable at protecting itself as well as your creatures for a very little amount of mana, though immediate redeployment can sometimes be a little difficult without some ramp support. Artifacts can offer green a large pool of different effects to choose from. However, we will be focusing primarily on cards that are directly associated with the color, those being the Great Hinge, Birthing Pod, and Lifecrafter's Bestiary. The Great Hinge, when first looked at, seems like a huge expense mana-wise. However, its first ability makes it to where our greatest power among creatures we control drop this value to a manageable number. Once played, the Great Hinge embodies green, with it offering us good ramp and a little life gain. And should we cast creatures with the ramp, we can draw a card and offer a little pump of +1/+1 to one of our creatures. Birthing Pod is an interesting artifact that gives some versatility to the color, with it being able to tutor for a creature with equal or one higher than the converted mana cost of a sacrificed creature. This card allows you to steadily grow in power, and pairing it with strong ETB effects can steadily gain you more and more value throughout a game. Lifecrafter's Bestiary is a fantastic artifact as it gives us a means of reliable card advantage. Scrying and the low cost card draw is exactly what the color wants and needs, and for only 3 mana is a great effect to have to generate value. The enchantment selection for green is quite incredible with cards like Growing Rites of Itlimoc, Garruk's Uprising, and Doubling Season. Growing Rites of Itlimoc by itself offers a nice means for finding a creature by being able to look at the top 4 cards of our library. But when we have 4 creatures is when things take a turn where it transforms into Itlimoc, Cradle of the Sun, which is essentially Gaia's Cradle. This card is insane for the amount of mana it can generate with just a few creatures, as one tap of this card can produce green mana equal to the amount of creatures you control, allowing for more and more value as time progresses. Garruk's Uprising offers us 2 abilities, both that can be greatly utilized. Should we play a creature with 4 or more power, we draw a card, which green really desires. However, these large power creatures also gain access to trample with this card, which allows us to crash over boards while also generating value. Lastly, Doubling Season is one of the most important cards for go wide and counter based strategies in the game, as this card allows for double generation of tokens and counters of any kind. Green sorceries are fairly straightforward, however very effective in the forms of Triumph of the Hordes, Genesis Wave, and Green Sun Zenith. Green is very well known for its overrun effects, and Triumph of the Horde is one of the most effective. This card gives all of our creatures trample, and more importantly infect, as well as a small buff to power and toughness. With this card, we can swing in with a modest sized board and either kill a player or win a game outright. Genesis Wave is an insane card as we can effectively mana dump all of our available mana into it and still have an effective board to block and interact, with it stating put all permanents revealed with this card onto the battlefield. This catches creatures, artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, and lands. Decks with this card will more than likely be running little to no instants or sorceries, as maximum value can be achieved with just running permanents. Green Sun Zenith is a very reliable creature tutor, as if we cast it for a little or a lot of mana, it will go back into the deck and can be used again. This card can pull key cards for our strategy or offer Divine Disruption to slow our opponents down. The option is truly ours for us to decide upon. Green has some selection for instant speed interactions in the form of Beast Within, Heroic Intervention, and Court of Calling. Beast Within is one of the best removal spells that green has, with it being able to take any permanent and turn it into a 3/3. This is a fantastic ability as we're able to not only get key creatures, artifacts, and enchantments, but also lands. Being able to get rid of the right non-basic land an opponent controls, such as Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, can set back or even lock an opponent out of the game. Heroic Intervention is one of the best board protection spells in the game for its incredible versatility. This card allows us to get around opponents' board wipes, targeted spells, and offers great protection for our creatures in combat. With this card, no matter what occurs next to Cyclonic Rift, our board will not be going anywhere after resolving this spell. Lastly, Court of Calling allows for an incredible creature tutor, as Convoke allows all of our creatures to essentially become mana dorks. With it, we're able to potentially find the best creature for any given situation, should we be able to resolve it. The color also offers a lot of support through planeswalkers in the form of Vivien, Champion of the Wilds, Garruk, Primal Hunter, and Wrenn and 7. Vivien, Champion of the Wild gives the static ability of giving all of our creatures flash. This allows green to be a little more reactive, as we can potentially avoid board wipes and other removal by playing creatures at the end of opponents' turns, as well as setting up combat to be more unpredictable against us. Vivien can also give Vigilance and Reach for a +1, making our board a lot more defensive, as well as being able to give card advantage through our -2, allowing us to cast a creature from the top 3 cards of our library. Garruk Primal Hunter is a fairly straightforward planeswalker and holds true to the color identity. It wants to generate 3/3 tokens off of its +1, draw a nice amount of cards with its -3, and flood the board with 6/6s with the amount equal to how many lands we control. Overall, Garruk is a solid planeswalker and likely fits into any green strategy that can be played. Wrenn and 7 is an incredibly strong planeswalker, as he has a plethora of options to choose from. His +1 and 0 allows us to flood the board with lands that can either be found on the top of our deck or in our hand. His -3 gives us a giant body that is great defensively, as it has reach, and its power and toughness are equal to the amount of lands that we control. Finally, he has a great recursion in his -8 that gets all permanents from our graveyard back to our hand and gives us no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, so that we won't have to discard. Overall, Ren and 7 just gives us a lot of explosive mana potential, which can catapult us above all other players. Though battles have only recently been introduced, some that can use a mention are Invasion of Chandalar and Invasion of Ikoria. Invasion of Chandalar gives us great late recursion, with us being able to get 3 permanents from our graveyard back to our hands. Should we be able to transform it into Leyline Surge, we get a fantastic cheat ability, with us being able to put a permanent from our hand onto the battlefield. Synergizing with itself quite well is if some of our late key permanents were taken out, then we can redeploy them for no mana. Invasion of Ikoria gives us a great form of either recursion or tutor for a non-human creature. This alone is quite valuable for its versatility, as the card selected is immediately put onto the battlefield. Should we want to transform this card into Zolorthra, Apex of Ikoria, we get a giant 8/8 body that allows us to assign combat damage as though it wasn't blocked. This is a fantastic ability that falls between trample and unblockable, where no matter what occurs, we will have the chance to either get all of our damage in on a player, or be able to apply it as it were normally blocked. Overall, both of these cards seem like fantastic includes for most green decks, and can be utilized no matter what side they're on. Though not necessarily needed within a good deck, there are some utility lands that can be better utilized rather than just basic forest, with those being Boseiju Who Endures, Mosswort Bridge, and Castle Garenbrig. Boseiju Who Endures is one of the best lands to have been printed in a long time. With its ability, we are able to have this effect that can destroy an enchantment or artifact. The reason why this is so good is that this is an activated ability rather than being a spell, so it is much harder for blue decks to try and counter, and though they do have means of doing so, it is much more limited. Mosswort Bridge is a tap land that gives us a little bit of card advantage through the form of Hideaway. With it, we're able to look at the top 4 cards of our library and exile one of them. Later in the game, we're able to play this exiled card without having to pay its mana cost, should we have the total power and creatures to activate it. This card seems perfect to hide a late game bomb that our opponents don't know anything about, with us likely wanting a card with high converted mana cost and highly synergistic to our current strategy. Castle Garenbrig is a nice form of easy ramp for our creatures. It will still tap for green mana should we need it, but if we have 4 mana to spend and creatures with high mana cost, then we may use its ability to generate a little extra mana. Though not a lot, this is a small form of ramp within our lands that can be incredibly hard for our opponents to stop. This 1 extra mana can set us ahead and generate more value than our opponents can reasonably keep up with, so long as we have creatures to play. Figuring that color pairings have their own strengths and weaknesses, I think it's good to talk about them in separate videos, as pairings like Gruul and Sultai have their own style of play. This is only meant to show the strengths and weaknesses of mono green, and the strategies it can deploy in a competitive environment. With that being said, mono green functions incredible by itself, and, in personal opinion, is probably the best monocolor a person can use. Of course, there are many different aspects that could be talked about that were not mentioned in this overview, but this is just meant to show an overall synopsis of the color. Should this be a color you have been considering picking up, or an opponent seems to run mono green consistently and you're looking to find a way to take advantage of the color's flaws, I hope this video was helpful. I will continue to talk about the colors and the color pairings in the future, however I would like to get through all the mono colors first. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.